Okay, so this afternoon what I'm going to do is we're going to continue our discussion of the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. Of the economy. This is part C. Okay. All right. So I left off in my last discussion with a point in the 1970s in which the economy went into a stagflation. And when it did, because the cause of the stagflation is from the supply curve, the short-run supply curve, moves to the left. And when it moves to the left, it moves up along the aggregate demand curve, meaning that prices start rising. But we also get a decrease in real output. And so the economy gets the double whammy. It's kind of like you end up with both inflation and unemployment. And so, okay, how do you deal with this? Because most of the policies that were suggested by Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, was to get the aggregate demand curve to shift back to the right. Now, if we shift our aggregate demand curve to the right, if you recall, what happens is it moves the AD curve up along the short-run aggregate supply curve. So yes, you get an increase in employment, but you also get continued high prices. So it was like, this isn't really a good solution. And so what happened was economists started going back to the board and they came up with a lot of different new ideas about how the economy functions. And so now in this, in the current state, we have theories like post-Keynesian or neo-Keynesian policies, ideas. So we have neoclassical, we have real business cycle theory, we have rational expectations, we have monetarism, and we have supply-side supply-side ideas. So we have a whole variety of different views about how the economy works. So the question becomes, how are we going to create a model that depicts the basic relationships in such a way that we can show how these different theories play out in the model? So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you the most current version of the model of the ADAS model of the economy. So I'm gonna label it as I've done in the past. What we'll do is, first off, we put our GDP deflator on the axis, on the vertical axis to represent the price level. And we put real GDP on the horizontal axis. And we go and we have I'm going to put in the model, I'm going to put a vertical curve to represent the potential, or where the economy would be if it was at full employment, or if it was on its PPF. And we refer to that not as potential, but long run. Okay, so we're going to call that the long run aggregate supply. So that stays the same. And we're going to have the aggregate demand curve. We're going to slope that downward just as we did before for the same reasons. And we'll go through that again. So the AD curve will slope downward. And this time, instead of having the horizontal short-run aggregate supply, what we're going to have is a short-run aggregate supply curve that actually slopes upward. And the degree of the slope depends on a number of factors, but we're just going to assume that it's just generally gradually slopes upward here. And I'm going to label that SRAS. Okay, so now we have a model of our economy that has three curves in it. So let's talk about how things are depicted in this model, what this model is actually showing us. So first off, I'm going to show you this point where the three curves intersect. That is the point at which the economy is functioning at. Okay, for some reason it just squished up again on me. Okay, and so this is where what we call long-run macroeconomic equilibrium. Okay, so that intersection where the long-run aggregate supply curve, the short-run aggregate supply curve, and the AD curve, if they all intersect at the same point, then we're at long-run aggregate supply. Long-run macroeconomic equilibrium. So I'm going to put this in this graph here. I'm going to write this in. This is the long-run macroeconomic equilibrium. Okay, and so that is the basic here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this because we're going to need this graph in a few minutes to show some other things. Okay, so I'm going to just copy it. And, okay, and okay, so now we have two graphs here. Actually, I got this second graph is in the wrong place. Okay, so let me get this over here. And somehow or other it got warped on me, but it'll be okay. It's not too warped. All right. So we'll look at this other graph in a little bit. So here's our long-run macroeconomic equilibrium. Now, what I want to show you, oh darn. Well, gonna have to take it away. All right, one more try here. All right, now, oops, I'm gonna pull this down here, and we'll pull this over here. Okay, so let's talk about our different curves here. Let's start with the long-run aggregate supply curve. So the long-run aggregate supply curve or LRAS represents, now that's the weirdest thing I ever saw. Why is that so small? Okay, represents, it looks like a shrunk letter, represents the economy's potential output. If the economy was at full employment, is at full employment, and operating on our PPF. Okay, so this means that prices are, since prices do not impact what we can produce or do not determine what we can produce, the only the quantity, the whole PPF or the LRAS is vertical. Okay, only resources and technology affect. Can impact the LRAS. Okay, and that, since they're not actually in the graph, the LRAS does not shift as a consequence. Okay, so we end up with, since it doesn't do that, we end up, it doesn't shift at all or anything like that. In fact, this is one of the things about, one of the things to keep in mind about the LRAS is it actually reflects what our real constraint is in the economy. No matter what we do, we really cannot produce output that exceeds our PPF, at least not for the short, for the, the long run. And we can almost look at it as the sustainable level of output for, the long period of time. Because in the short run, it's possible to put out more output than can be produced if we were on our PPF by, pulling down our resource, our savings. Like, for instance, we could have inventories, outstanding inventories, and we can draw on those, and we could draw on our savings and all that. We can also have our workers working overtime, and we could have our machines being, run around the clock. But it's not sustainable. I mean, you and I know how difficult it would be to continually be working 70, 80, 90 hours a week. We just really couldn't do it. We'd start getting really burned out, and we would find that, hey, it's not worth it. We have to live our lives. And so it's not sustainable. So when we're on our production possibilities frontier, it's the sustainable level of output that we can produce using all of our resources. And that's why we call it full employment. So the LRAS represents when we're on the PPF, and it represents sustainable level of output. Okay? Now, the LRAS will shift for any reason, so the LRAS shifts due to changes changes in resources and technology. And that's really the only thing that will cause it, because the only resources and technology affect our LRAS. Now, if we go down to the graph that I have down below, note what happens if the LRAS shifts. Like, say, for instance, if we were to look at Japan's economy, if this was the model of Japan's economy back in March 11th, 2011, we would have seen a significant shift in the LRAS. It would have shifted right. I mean, excuse me, left. You know, the other right. And we would have, you know, we could see that that was because they lost resources because of the tsunami. And, you know, for instance, shipyards and schools and places of business and sadly a lot of people as well lost their lives because of the tsunami. And so that's a loss of resources, and it sets back what their production potential was for at least that period of time. And so we get that kind of shift when there's a change in resources and technology. But nothing else will cause the LRAS to shift other than changes in resources and technology. In other words, anything that affects the PPF will shift the SRAS. Okay, so now we have this other the AD curve, and if you recall from the other discussion, we have the aggregate demand curve, which is called AD, or AD curve, represents the relationship between the quantity of real GDP or real output demanded at different price levels. Okay, and this relationship, this is an inverse relationship. Okay, this is not a relationship where, you know, which means that it slopes down. Since the relationship, we'll say it differently. Since the relationship is an inverse relationship, the AD curve slopes downward. And there are three explanations for this. And they are the following relationships we see. We have, there is the real balance or the real wealth effect. We're going to call it the real balance effect. There is the interest rate effect. And then there is the open economy effect. So if I go back to this graph that I have down here on the bottom left, and if I was to show you two different points on the AD curve here, this is just exaggerated. We can take a look at this. But for instance, the real balance effect, the one at the top here. Let's say that we have okay, so let's say we go to the store with $10. And the price of bread is $2.50, or $2. So we're just going to pretend that the $2 is our price level, okay? The price level is an index number. It doesn't have a dollar sign in front of it. But when the price level is here, this is when the price of bread is $2. We'll just say that, okay? And when the price level is up here, the price of bread is up at the top here at $2.50, okay? Now we go to the store with a $10 bill, then what's going to happen is the quantity is going to vary. So let's say we go to the store with a $10 bill and the price of bread is $2. If we go over here, to this point, we see that we could buy 5 loaves of bread, okay? But if the price of bread is $2.50, we could only buy 4 loaves of bread. So as you can see, if you have the same quantity of money, the price level determines how much we can actually buy with that money, the amount of money we have in our pockets. So this is what the real balance effect says. So notice how we get this movement down along or up along the demand curve because of this change in the price level. So the relationship between the price level and the quantity of real GDP demanded is going to be an inverse relationship. When the prices are higher, in the real balance effect, the quantity of money that we have buys less. And when the prices are lower, the quantity of money that we have, the same quantity, a given quantity, will buy more. And so that's what the real balance effect shows us. So I'm going to take these out of here because I don't want them. Okay. We'll get to it later. There we go. What the? Oh, okay. Yeah, this is what happens when you have a lot of noise on your graph. I will come back to those things later. Okay, so that's the reason for the aggregate demand curve for sloping downward. But the next issue is what happens when the aggregate demand, what causes the aggregate demand curve to shift. And so we're going to, let's see, the aggregate demand curve shifts, or the AD curve shifts due to changes in the rest of the world. I call rest of the world ROW. I'll spell it out right now. But if you see ROW, that means rest of the world, okay? That impact C, I, G, or NX, okay? So what are C, I, G, or NX? So I'm going to just put this in my graph over here. AD is equal to C plus I plus G plus NX. That's what aggregate demand equals. If you look in our graph over here to the left, okay. So what is a change in the rest of the world that would cause a change in consumption spending, investment spending, government spending, or net exports? That's not a change in the price level or the GDP deflator. Well, you can have a change in consumption because people start getting worried about the future. One of the, when the airplanes went and, flew into the World Trade Center in 2001, a lot of people started saying, this is pretty scary. I don't know what the future is going to hold. I better hold on to my money because I don't know what's going to happen. So they stopped spending. They stopped thinking, things are really tough. As Trump was first realized that he was going to become president, or he was elected president, what happened is global investment markets suddenly started dropping. Dow futures fell. They had fallen quite a few points, I think like 600 or 700 points. They climbed back up by morning, but a lot of that was possibly due to Trump's acceptance speech. Supposedly, I didn't witness it, but supposedly it kind of calmed people down. And so now investors were willing to put money into investment. Now this investment that's here is not the kind of money that you see in the investment market, but it's that kind of thinking that affects investment decisions. Investment in new physical capital, which is what this I in aggregate demand represents. The government would change, if the government changes its budget and starts cutting expenses on certain types of things like NASA or something, they're decreasing government spending, and that's going to cause the AD curve to shift. So we could see a decrease in AD if they did that, okay? So many of these things, these are the kinds of things that impact the AD curve, and so I'm gonna make these all bold here, okay? And so the AD curve will shift due to anything that impacts consumption spending, investment spending, government spending, or net exports. Now the interesting thing is that we talked about, I think I'm going to just have to get rid of these things. We talked about a short run aggregate supply curve, which was horizontal in the last session that we had. But this particular thing, we noticed that the SRAS is no longer vertical, horizontal. Now it slopes upward. So let's talk about what causes or why we portray the short run aggregate supply to be sloping upward. And one of the things to keep in mind is, okay, so the difference between the long run and the short run is that in the short run, we have producers that do respond to prices. That's what that is saying when it slopes upward like that. So why would producers in the short run respond to changes in prices? Well, there are different explanations for it, but I'm going to give you one explanation for why the SRAS slopes upward like that. Let's start at our equilibrium point here. Right here. And we know that the price level is a certain price level. Okay? So we're going to say this is the price level, PL, when wages are negotiated. Okay, so let's say that the economy is at long-run equilibrium and our producer, our employers, and our workers get together and negotiate wages. Now, the employer looks at that, the price level, that's the price of his output. Okay, so let's say okay. So say the employers, the economy is at equilibrium, at long-run equilibrium. And the workers and the employer get together to negotiate wages. Okay, the workers think that prices are going to be where they are, think about prices as being what they are, and they look at that as their cost of living. Consider the current price level as representing their cost of living. And meaning that they anticipate that they're going to have to pay the prices that they're going to pay for food and for gas and for entertainment and for their housing and all that is going to be where it is now. And so when they get together with the employer, they're going to want they might also think that maybe prices might go up a little bit, okay? They might plan for that, and they'll negotiate with the employer wages that they think will be sufficient to cover their cost of living, okay? The employers, on the flip side, the employers can, view the current price level as representing how much revenue they will receive for their output. Okay, so everybody is looking at the current price level and they're making a decision. Now when the employers and the workers get together, they base the wages on the current price level, expected price level. Okay, so when the workers and the employers negotiate the wages, they are going to base their decision or contract on the current price level and any expected changes in that. So, you know, because we all expect sometimes changes. Okay, so that's what they do in the current period. They go and they look at the current price level and they negotiate wages. Then, when the price level changes, however, let's say that the the aggregate demand curve was to shift. Let's say it shifts to the left like this, and I'm going to have to change that a little bit. Okay, so let's say for whatever reason, let's say there's an oil embargo and the AD curve shifts to the left. Well, maybe not an oil embargo, but something that affects gas prices and it causes gas prices to rise. And so what happens is the AD curve shifts to the left. Oh, maybe actually we'll think that we'll look at it as a change in, due to the housing bubble collapse. Okay, people, when the housing bubble collapsed, people started feeling a pinch because houses stopped selling and buying and things like that. And so what was happening is construction workers were finding themselves out of work. But we'll talk about that. So anyways, the money that the buyers have in their pockets is less than what it was. Okay, so I'm going to show you a new, so we got a new intersection here. Okay, and let me show you the new price level. So we have a new price level if I put it over here. And in the new price level, we'll see, okay, at this new price level, we're going to see, oh, I got to make that smaller. Okay. Price level after AD shift. Okay, so now we're at a lower price level. Now, what does that mean? When the AD shifts in this context, okay, so when the AD shifts, so let's say the AD shifts to the left, down along the SRAS curve, okay, we're going to see the price level falls. Okay, so what does that mean when it falls? And output decreases, or real output. real GDP, I'm going to call it, decreases. Now, why does the real GDP decrease and not just prices? So the reason that our GDP decreases and the price level is because not all of the adjustment is made by, to the change in the economy or the change in AD. Is made by changing prices. And here's the explanation. Okay, so what's happening here is they've made a deal when the economy was at long-run macroeconomic equilibrium, and people expected prices to be there. When the AD shifts, the producer finds that his prices of his output have fallen. Now, problem with that is he can't reduce his wages. And because he can't reduce his wages, he has, and the only other alternative he can choose is to decrease his output. So, okay, so when the AD shifts, the producer finds that his output prices decrease. This reduces his revenues. And as a consequence, but not his wages, not the wages. Wages, because that is, they can't be changed because wages can't be changed. Due to the contract. Okay? Therefore, the producer has to reduce output to adapt to the changing market conditions. The change in AD. Okay, so you might say is this means that that there will be unemployment. Okay, so you think about it. Let's say you're a business owner and you have to, it turns out that there's not as many people walking into your restaurant, and so your revenues that you're getting from your customers has fallen. And so what do? Well, can't lower your wages because they've already been agreed upon. So the only thing you can do is you can start laying off some of your workers, or you might actually reduce their hours. For instance, you might go to the, one of your chefs. You might say, hey, I don't want you in the lunch hour. You just come for the dinner hour, and so he cuts some of the hours that his workers are working. And this is how he addresses it. So this is why the SRAS slopes upward, because part of the response is a change in prices, but the other part of the response is a change in output. So the producer does change his output in the short run to a change in the economy or to a change in price level. However, what happens in the long run is a different story. What happens is if this change persists, whatever it is that has happened, you can imagine that in the long run, that the short-run aggregate supply curve could potentially shift back to the right. So that you have this new short-run aggregate supply curve. Because what's happened is, in the long run, what will happen is that both the producers and the workers, what they're going to do is they're going to probably change their expectations of where prices are, and it'll get renegotiated. Now, what may happen is that, and oftentimes does happen, is that because of the unemployment created initially, workers get replaced with new workers, and the new workers come on at lower wages. So you get a shift to the right due to price expectations. So here's what happens after change in price. The SRAS is going to shift after the price expectations have changed. So the new workers will hire on, will say, yeah, they'll be willing to work for lower wages simply because of they don't expect their cost of living to be as high. So that takes a while for that accommodation. In the short run, it's in the short run response to the shift in the AD curve is to reduce output more than it is to reduce prices. But after a while, people's price expectations change and the whole curve shifts. Okay, so then the SRAS curve shifts back to the long run. So the short run aggregate supply curve, what we can say is the SRAS slopes upward because in the short run, producers do change their output levels in response to changes in price in the price level. And there's three explanations for this. So three explanations, different theories, three theories to explain why. And the first one is the one that I just talked about, this one over here, which is called the sticky wage theory. And then there's the sticky price theory. And then there is the price misperceptions theory. So you can check your explanation for these other two theories in the textbook. Okay. Now the SRAS shifts due to changes in input prices. Okay, so for instance, if there is a change in input price, the curve will shift. So if there's a change in minimum wage, our SRAS will shift to the left, because if it increases minimum wage. It depends on how things work out on that, but even if it shifts to the left, it may be countered by a shift to the right of the LRAS, which tends to lower prices. So it might not be as much of an issue. It might be countered by that, which is, I think, the argument behind the way in which the California minimum wage is to increase over 5 years. I think they're expecting that our production level, our LRAS for California, will be going to the right about the same rate as the SRAS is moving to the left. So we will it'll balance out in the long run. It's not going to be really out of step. And then we'll see changes in price expectations, which is what I showed in the graph here. And then it also changes for any changes due to changes in resources and technology. In resources and technology. And if these changes in resources and technology are long-term, then it'll affect the long-run aggregate supply curve as well. So changes in resources and technology, they both impact the short run if they're not permanent. If they are permanent and they're not temporary, they're permanent, then they will affect the long-run aggregate supply curve. For instance, during the 1970s, the SRAS shifted because of the oil embargo, which caused, oil prices and everything else to go up for our businesses. But the thing was, it was a temporary change. It didn't affect our long-run aggregate supply because it wasn't a long-term, decrease in our resources. Okay, I'm going to finish here, and we will, hopefully you can check it out. I already covered the other two topics there, fiscal policies and government budget yesterday. Okay.